Well, hi, everybody. Today we're talking to Marie Mutsuki Mockett. Hello, Marie.
Hello.
And you are all the way in Tokyo. You're
I
coming to,
am. I'm afraid
yes,
so. It's my morning, probably your early evening or
yes,
yeah.
early evening. Well, you are the author of a very unusual book called The Tree Doctor. It's it's filled with sex and death and rebirth and literature and nature. How tell us what is your view of the storyline in a few
Oh
words?
gosh.
What's the story about?
It's about all those things, I guess. And it's about a woman who's finds herself unexpectedly alone. She has a family, she has a husband and children, and she has a mother who's aging and who is unwell. And the heroine of this novel suddenly finds herself alone and stranded because of what she calls the sickness, which, was basically the pandemic, and
Mhm.
confronting these questions of how to stay alive and how not to be afraid and what should one do or what can one do in a situation like
Oh
this.
yeah.
And
And the
so
story takes place in two different settings. Tell us about the settings. I mean,
well, the major setting would be her childhood home in Northern California, where she's taking care of her mother's garden and home. And do you mean the other setting
but
would be
where's Thomas? Where's
her
where?
husband and her family? Yeah, they're in Hong Kong. So she's
Okay.
separated by a wide ocean, as we are today.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you classify this book? Is it more literary or commercial? Was it difficult for you to decide where the story fits?
Um, I don't think about that. I mean, I would have
Good for you.
it seemed like it had I mean, I hope it's a book that everybody can read and everybody can enjoy. I never set out ever to write something telling myself I'm going to write something literary, I'm going to write something highbrow. Um, that has never been my intention as a writer. I seem to have been categorized that way, but it's certainly not what I think about in anything that I've written, and not with this either. I thought, well, it's got sex in it, and I'm kind of proud of the sex scenes, so hopefully people will enjoy them.
I'm going to
Um,
ask you about that in a minute.
but I never think I'm going to do something literary. It's never my ambition.
Your heroine is unnamed throughout the entire book. Why did you do that?
I don't know. It just felt right. I think as I went along, I thought to myself, why am I not giving this person a name? And no name really came to me. But I also, as I said, I really wanted anybody to be able to read this book and have access to it and not be burdened by a name. Because a name can sometimes conjure an impression in a reader's mind, or, you know, if I had named the
True.
character Carrie or Cindy, somebody might know a Carrie or Cindy or be a Carrie or Cindy. And I just wanted people to be able to read the story and accept the story. Um, there are enough very vivid details in this book that I didn't want to predispose the reader's experience with who the narrator was or might look like.
That's
So, I mean, that's just
interesting.
sort of what happened. And I just never came across a name that I really liked that worked. And actually, the tree doctor, who eventually gets a name,
Yes.
he originally didn't have a name,
Yes,
and but then
until
he
quite
had to have a
late.
name, so he got a name. Yeah.
Um, what is the woman's main challenge, or what is she searching for or longing for? Would that spoil it if you Tell
No,
us
I
what
don't
is.
think so. I mean, I think she's afraid of death.
Mm,
Her mother,
mhm,
she knows her mother's going to die, and I think anybody who's been in that situation of being a caretaker for somebody who is ill and inching closer and closer to I mean, I remember years ago, when I was a lot younger, somebody said to me, well, if you have a parent and they die suddenly, that's shocking. But then you have the shock, and the person didn't suffer, they just are gone. But then if you have somebody who's very, very slowly dying, you have time to prepare, but then that's painful in another way. Um, my parents are both gone. I was very close to my parents. I love them very, very much. And one died quite quickly, and the other one took an extremely long time. And they're both,
oh,
it's
yeah.
excruciating no matter how you look at it. And so this narrator is exhausted because she's um, had dreams and hopes for what she wanted to do with her life, and she has felt that effaced because she's married to a man who makes a lot of money and she doesn't make any money, and they have two children, and so she's busy sort of suppressing what it is she wants to do, caring
Mm,
for her kids, and he's the breadwinner. He tells her over and over again, well, I am the breadwinner. um, but she has a mother who's slowly, slowly, slowly dying, and so she feels sort of like she exists in an emotional vacuum. And then most of all, she's afraid of death. And then this virus comes and seems to be mowing everybody down in the world, and that makes her more afraid of death. And so that I'd say that's the thing she's afraid of. Well, maybe two things. One, this feeling of having an unlived and unexpressed life, which I think can really hit us when we, hit what they call
that's
middle
right.
age. What
That's
is the
right.
unlived? What did I not do? What is my unlived life? And
Right.
then being afraid of death.
Yeah.
Those are really the two things. I mean, it's not a huge book. It's not a really long book, but the themes are sort of weighty, and but that's what she's afraid of. And
Okay.
she
Well,
tries to address it with,
she
yeah,
also teaches a literature class, and they're studying the tale of uh, Jin,
Genji.
Genji. Thank you.
Yep.
Um, how does that story inform the story, your book?
Well, the Tale of Genji. So people sometimes call the Tale of Genji the world's first psychological novel. It's written around 1000 AD. It was written in Japan by a woman,
Hmm.
and so it's kind of a cultural touchstone for many people in Japan. It's really hard to kind of escape the effect of Genji. In fact, right now, every year there is a historical drama that runs on TV, plays every Sunday, and it's episodic. So, week one, week two, all the way through to the end of the year. And this year it is all about Murasaki Shikibu, the author of The Tale of Genji. So, Sundays,
Okay.
we're crowding around the TV watching this drama unfold. So, the narrator knows that this book has this important role in this culture,
Mhm.
and that the book was written by a woman, which is not a man, but by a woman. And so that all of that is pretty amazing to her, but she doesn't really understand the meaning of the book. And if you just Googled what is the point of the Tale of Genji, you'll probably get an answer something like it's about court life in the Heian period, Japan's classical age, and about the beauty of impermanence, or the role of impermanence in our lives. So for a person who's afraid of a plague and afraid of death, that book should have some sort of relevance. But she doesn't understand what that relevance is. And so some of that gets unpacked and unlocked in this novel, hopefully in a way that allows readers to experience, kind of some of the wonder of that novel, which is hard
Yes.
because it's a very old book. Um, but it
Well,
does
now
have something to tell us.
there are several sex scenes in the book. How difficult was it for you to write those scenes in a way that, you know, wouldn't come out as pornography or
I
something
guess it's a
else.
fine line, right, between
Yeah.
pornography and so I was asked this question, and the truth is the sex scenes were some of the first things that were written. I mean, I wrote the book straight through, but the sex scenes were in the first draft. There was a lot of rearranging of other material, but not the sex scenes, and they came pretty easily and pretty naturally. And I guess, the truth is I'd probably been thinking for a long time if I were ever to write sex scenes, how would I write them? And I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be embarrassed.
Right.
I didn't want to use any what I think of as falsely profound terms. Like I didn't want any fake profundity. That was what I used to say. Like I don't want to say his manness, his firmness, her flesh, her womanliness, any of this sort of weird
Right.
poetry that
Are
often
you
used by
you
male
you
writers, where you can
you
tell they're really embarrassed that they're writing about sex, but they're going to show us that they're not embarrassed. And then they use these lofty terms
did
that really have nothing to
you
do with
did
anything.
that
So no, I
very
didn't want to do
eloquently.
that.
No, you
Um,
didn't. You know,
and I
it
didn't
was
want to
very
be
eloquent.
funny because there's a lot of ha-has in this funny ha-ha, which is just another way of saying I'm embarrassed. So
Okay. Trees and plants are really a metaphor throughout this whole book. What gave you the idea to use nature that way?
I think that that actually does very much come from the tale of Genji,
Yeah.
um, which which is very the first thing that the tale of Genji was famous for after it was written, aside from the scandalous stories that appear in it, but that people in the medieval period saw it as a text of literary value, were the poems. There are quite a number of poems that appear in the text, and many of them have to do with human feelings refracted through nature. So,
Mm.
expressing longing or expressing love or anger through natural phenomena like flowers and trees and mist. And I've always, I've known that's like the first thing you learn about the tale of Genji when you learn something about it. You learn about the poems and the way in which human feelings are expressed through them and thus through nature. So that as a
Yeah.
sort of aesthetic value was something I had been thinking about. And I was in California during the pandemic gardening and thought, oh, this must be what those poems are about. The joy of waking up every morning and seeing if something has bloomed yet. Um, my life was slowed down to the pace of what was going on in the garden. And so that seemed like a pretty good way to explore time and explore changing emotions. But I was not having an affair with the tree doctor.
Okay, I wasn't going to ask you that. Was this book difficult to plot? Did you begin with some sort of an outline, and you said you just wrote it straight through?
Yeah, I did. Um, no, I don't think it was so hard. It's a small cast of characters in a in one setting, and we know the you learn about the character, the main character, fairly quickly. And um, no, it wasn't terribly difficult. I sort of had a place where she was starting and a place where she was ending, and I knew, I finished it before the pandemic got through the worst of it. I finished it while we were all still on lockdown, in other words. Um, but I will tell you when the lockdown began, when the pandemic really began to dominate the news, and this sort of thinking is also in the book. I thought about all the times I'd gone to Japan and gone to a temple or a festival and read, this shrine or this temple or this festival was enacted to ward off a plague. And and we still give incense to the Buddha at this temple to ward off a plague. There's a lot of that in Japan, because historically there were a lot of these plagues. And so when COVID started to dominate the news, I thought, oh, it's one of those plagues. And so it's one of those events, and there will be an end. And one day we'll look back and say, we did X, Y, and Z because of this plague. And so I had in my head, oh, this is what's happening now, and then there will be an end because this has happened historically. So I kind of thought, well, I'll write about that whole cycle, even though we're not at the end of this. And so that was in my thinking. And then emotionally, what can happen to this character as she's moving through this
Right.
what I call the sickness.
The tree doctor tells her that there are often more selves than just one. Do you think
Right.
that creative people have multiple selves?
Um, do creative people have multiple selves? I mean, I don't know. I mean, creative people may be attuned to, I mean, creative people may be creative in all ways, and so always attuned to possibility and always attuned to what's another path I could take, or how could I change my life, or um, well, could I go there? Could I do this? I mean, but I don't think it's just creative people. I mean, I think, you know, life can suddenly, circumstances can change in life, and people find themselves in situations or doing things that they don't expect. And I think that's just part of being human. So I feel it's hard for me to say, creative people are special because, because anybody could find themselves in circumstances that they didn't expect.
True. Well, you
What if you
write
do if you
about
hit the what if you do if you hit the lottery? How does life change?
that's right. You write about the seam between life and death and about the terror of being alone. Um,
Hmm.
do you think that most writers, or maybe most people, fear being alone?
Oh, I think loneliness is something that plenty of people fear, including writers, but writers do have to be comfortable with their own company because the only way you get anything written is to spend a lot of time alone. My son is 14, and he's discovered the terms introvert and extrovert, and so he'll always tell me, "Well, I'm an introvert, mommy. I need some downtime." And then and and then sometimes I'll say, well, mommy's actually an extrovert, and he's shocked because I do spend quite a lot of time alone, and I'm willing to do things on my own. I'll go places or take a trip or go for walks or eat alone, and it doesn't bother me.
Mm,
But a sense of loneliness, um, of course, is some. I think humans are essentially communal and like company, and like I think we're at our best when we're able to share and able to care for each other. I think that brings out the best in people.
that's
So,
true.
yeah.
In the Tree Doctor, you mention writing practices for those who attend the literary sessions. How do writing practices, um, how are you writing practices used?
For writers,
Well, in the story, you say that um, she teaches the importance
yes.
of writing practices, and just what kind of writing practices?
Well, I think she's particularly focused on that toward the end of the book, where it becomes aware that the writer of the Tale of Genji is aware of the value of the practice of writing. I mean, as I said, there are hundreds of poems
Right.
throughout the book, and the poems often are the way in which characters, and I think we can say even maybe specifically the women, although the men too, but the women are able to express what they feel. I mean, there's women who don't have a lot of freedom. It's 1,000 years ago, but they
Right.
still tell us how they feel through their poems. And
Yes.
so in the Tree Doctor, the narrator, or the protagonist, I should say, the protagonist sees the ability to write as a way to almost create a self, and sees the importance of that. by saying,
Mm.
I am this and I feel this, it's an assertion of self. And as I kind of said at the beginning, this main character is at a place in her life where she has so many family obligations that she's literally feeling unexpressed. And
Right.
so we watch her through the course of this book express herself in all ways. And she does center on writing ultimately as a way to express and assert herself. And so, she's also a frustrated writer, right? She had one novel
Yes.
and then her husband made all the money, and so that was sort of the end of her writing career. It happens to
How,
a lot of people.
yes. How did you find your agent and your publisher?
Oh my gosh. I had another agent who has passed away,
Oh,
um and she was a legend. Her name was Irene Skolnick, and
oh,
I actually worked for her um in her office, I think.
oh,
And I was at a writing convention, and I somehow got introduced to her, and she was looking for somebody to work in her office, answer phones, that kind of thing.
wow, yes.
And so that was how I met her. And I actually had an agent before that, and somebody had made an introduction and handed him some writing that I had done. Um, but then with my current agent, Ellen, I just wrote her and said, I have a couple of books and I'm a writer and I'm looking for a new agent. And I had to go through the process of submitting work, which she read, and then we interviewed, and she wanted to know what my new projects were going to be. And this is the process that she would put anybody through. Um,
Right.
and then
Did
she
it take a long
agreed to
time to
represent
find a
me.
publisher? Did it take a
Um,
long?
well, I have a pre-existing relationship with Graywolf, and so
Yes.
I'm actually contracted to write something completely different. And so I had to say,
Yeah,
I
they're
joke that this
great,
book
great
is an
publisher.
accidental pregnancy. I said, I've accidentally written a novel instead. Could I send this to you to look at first?
How
And
does
so
it feel to have been endorsed by Oprah and other heavy
I couldn't
weights?
believe it. I mean, that's just amazing. Isn't that amazing?
It
I
is.
couldn't believe it. I'm just so full of gratitude, really. I mean, what else can you say?
Right.
Um, I can't believe it, really.
That's awesome.
I
Well,
was so
yeah.
excited. Yeah. And I hope, it's supposed to be a book for many women, for women readers to see themselves
Right,
in it and
right.
to feel good about themselves and for us to be able to talk honestly about these stages of life where we just feel like we have too much going on and can't live and can't express ourselves. And it's very common to be in what they call the
Yes.
sandwich generation. And so I was really, really thrilled that might have resonated.
That's great. Well, the book is The Tree Doctor, and it is uh, mesmerizing and interesting read. One final question, do you have any advice for writers who are trying to break into this tough market today?
Oh, I know it's so tough. Um, I feel like the advice is probably still the same, which is to write a story that you feel is missing. Look at the world. What do you see as urgent that isn't being expressed or talked about, and write that. Because chances are, if you feel that urgency, well, the urgency will help you see the project all the way through to the end, because it does take that sort of daily, as we were discussing, being alone and writing to make a book happen.
Right.
But that urgency will carry through in the project and likely will be a story that is important for people. And that's really kind of the only way that you can get your voice heard. If you're speaking with urgency about something, then other people will hear it and feel it.
That's
And that can be enough to sort of carry you through the entire process. But it is very hard. And I'm grateful to you for your very early words and reading the book. I mean, that was back in October, I think. I was
right.
so delighted that
Wow.
to have found a reader at that point already. That
Well,
made me was really happy.
actually, one of our other reviewers reviewed the book, and I didn't know it. And it came across my desk, and I thought that really looks interesting. And so I picked it up and said, "Yeah, I want to talk to her."
Oh.
So you got double coverage here.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful.
And it was worth it. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome. Thank you very much, Marie Mutsaki. Wait a minute. I'm messing it up.
It's okay.
Mutsuki Mockett. Okay. There
Yep.
you go. Thank
Okay.
you
Thank you so
for
much.
joining us today.
Thank you
All right.
so much.